Hi guys, in today's lesson we're going to be talking about containers. So what are containers? What do they even contain? Don't worry, we'll be talking about all of those things. So the first kind of container we're talking about today is lists. So what is a list? So think of a list as a shopping list. Say you want to buy your roll-on, your toothpaste, your beverages, your everything. Just think about it. So I'm gonna create my list first. Don't say I like food or anything. I'm just trying to make fun out of all of this. So I'm gonna say flour. I'm gonna say my perfume, something. Then I'm gonna just say food items, something. Okay, so that's it. Just 3 things on my list. So how do we recognize a list, right? A list has a square bracket, right? This is a square bracket. So if you look at your keyboard, you can see that right on top of your enter or your return key, just right up on top of it, and then you have a curly braces right on top of that bracket. So that's a list bracket, so it has a square bracket. So that's how you recognize a list. You can define an empty list like this. You can have an empty list like this too. So this is an empty list, right? And then this is a list of items. So it's not just restricted to string values alone. You could have a list of numbers, you could have a list of booleans, you could have a list of complex numbers. So it's not just restricted to strings alone, right? So you can have a list of all of those data types combined together. So that's just that about identifying a list. So the next kind of the container we're going to be talking about is a tuple. So what is a tuple? So I'm just going to be showing us how to recognize it, and then I'm going to be telling us how to use it. So let's say my tuple. Say my tuple. So say 1 and 2 or 3 or thereabout. So when do we use a list? When do we use a tuple? I'm gonna ask you a question. Just stick with me. So how do we recognize a tuple? A tuple has a bracket like this, like a parenthesis. So it's just right on top of 9 and 0. So the opening and the closing. So when do we use a tuple? We use a tuple when we are sure that that value is not going to change. So anything we define inside a tuple cannot be changed because tuples are immutable. They cannot be changed. So usually we make use of tuples when we know that the value is not going to change, like a constant or something, like coordinates, or a value that you know it's just going to be that value is going to be constant and you don't need to change it, because if you try to change it, then you're gonna get an error like tuples are not mutable, or immutable objects and stuff like that. So as we go on, I'm gonna be running us through tuple methods, list methods, dictionary methods, and other kind of methods too. So stick around, guys. So the next container we have is called a dictionary. So think of a dictionary as your lexicon. So your lexicon has a word and has a meaning, right? So a dictionary comes in key pairs, a key and a value. So I'm just gonna say my dict for my dictionary, and then I'm gonna say the dictionary I'm gonna open. So that curly brace is right on top of my square brackets. That my square brackets is a dictionary bracket, so it looks curly a bit. So I could say my name like this. I could say Kemi like this. I could say my age. Oh, not that one. I could say my age. I could say 13. Of course, I'm not 13. So I have my name and then Kemi. So this is separated by a colon. Don't forget that, a comma, and then my age, which is also a string, and then age 13. I can say availability. Is true. Okay, I'm just gonna put this in string so I don't get an error. Just gonna save it. So I'm not doing so much. I just want us to be able to identify each one of these guys, and then we're good to go. So I'm gonna give us a recap. So a list has a square brackets, and it could be a list of items. We use a list when we want to have an array of numbers, or we want to have more than one item in a particular container. So that's about the naming, right? You can name it anything you like. I'm just naming this particular one my list because it's my list, of course. It's not yours. Don't mind me, I'm just joking. So my tuple, we use tuple for constant values. And then my dictionary comes in key pair, a key and a value, a key and a value, a key and a value. So the values could be numeric, and it could be boolean. But then the keys are always string values because you need to give it something that is easily readable, and you can have keys being numbers. Of course, you can have it being numbers, but then not as a number. It could be a number in a string. So that's that about dictionary. So the next one is set. So you can have my set. Oh, not that one. So you can have my sets. So my set is an array. So I can have an array of numbers. I can have an array of other items, but there's something particular about sets. It doesn't return duplicate values. So if peradventure I print this out, or I'm using a set to take in inputs, okay, just gonna save this and come right here and run it. Okay, see, I have duplicate values, right? And that's because Python is interpreting this as a list, because if you look closely, you see that a list has a square bracket, a set has a square bracket. So how does Python distinguish those two? So I can specifically tell Python this is not a list I'm trying to define, this is a set. How do I do that? Just put in a set keyword here, and then I close this in a parenthesis, I save it, and then I come back here and run it. So if I display that again, you can see that my bracket is now changing to curly braces, and then I have individual values. I have just unique values being printed out. That's the first observation. And I also have my numbers being sorted out. So if you ever need to use a set, ensure that, just know that at the back of your mind that it's not going to display a duplicate value. It's just going to display all unique values, and usually it's going to sort it out for you. So the last but not the least is Frozensets. Okay, so think of a Frozenset as a twin brother to tuple, just like it's in set format. So I'm gonna say my froze, and then I'm gonna say Frozenset. Okay, and then I can have whatever I want to define in here. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a Frozenset is just like a tuple. it's immutable too. You can't change it. So in place of having a tuple, you can have a frozen set as a value in your dictionary. As long as you know that the value is not going to change, then you're good to go. So that's that about containers and defining a container. So if I wanted to define an empty list, I'm going to define it like this: an empty list, an empty tuple. Another way I could do this is saying my tuple 2, and I can have tuple like this. I can have it like this. So this is an empty tuple. My dictionary could also come in this. I can actually define an empty dictionary and have it like this, or I can have dict, and then I can have it this way. I can save it this way. So the same thing for sets. I can say my sets to, I can say sets, and then an empty set like that. So then the last one, my first two Frozensets. Okay, so but then I hope you know I won't be able to do anything to Frozensets and tuple. I won't be able to put in values in there if I define an empty container like that, but I can put in stuff for list, dictionary, and set if I choose to. But if I define an empty tuple, an empty frozen set, I might not be able to do much in there. So but then it's good practice to know how each of this works and how we can play around with it. So in our next lesson, we're going to be talking about list methods, tuple methods, dictionary methods, set methods, and frozen set methods. So stick around, guys. I'll see you in my next video.